Hello, welcome to the DD podcast. This is where we speak to female experts about all things relevant to working women in India today. From career advice to details about fitness, each thing that you can think of. In this episode, Anshika and I sat down with Divya George, who heads product at Hinge Health, which is the number one digital clinic for muscle and joint pain. Divya has had a very, very interesting start to her career. She has so much to say to young women out there, and when Anshika and I sat down to hear about her journey, we took back a lot, and we hope you do too. Let's dive in.
Hi, Divya. Welcome to our podcast. So, as you decided, we'll jump right into the questions and
Yeah. Cool.
start.
Thank you for having me, Anshika and Chandni.
Of course.
I know we've been trying to do this for like really long, but I'm so glad we finally get to sit down on a Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. Finally, I think both of us had a bit of an issue with falling sick and traveling and all that. And finally, we got a day that works.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think from when we started talking to now, we've all traveled and fallen sick. So, yeah, sisterhood.
Yeah.
But okay, jumping right into the questions, Divya.
Mhm.
First thing first, I know you started long ago with Auto Ninja, where a big part of your journey was to coach, say, juniors with confidence and doing better in life, etc. Now, I've always been curious with the idea of how confidence looks different in men and women, especially at a very young age. How you're taught about it, what you're told, how you perceive yourself, all those things. What I want to ask you is, have you seen those differences when you were working with these people? Do you have any special incidents that you remember and would like to tell us?
Yeah. I think my role did not exactly involve coaching, to be honest. When I started out, I faced a lot of confidence issues, right? And then it was a startup role, it was my first role. So I was also figuring things out as I on the journey, right? And then at some point I had some kind of playbook, hey, this is rules that you can use to be more better or confident at your role. So that's why I just started coaching people. This is what worked for me. This is maybe what you can do too. And maybe I don't know if it's a male versus female thing or something, but if you just look at confidence, it's just about how I feel a lot of people need to be really sure of what they're saying before they speak up. And then some people don't really care about it. Maybe they just think they're right, or maybe they don't care about the consequences. So they're a little more open to speaking up. And if you look at the corporate world also, I think maybe women are a little apprehensive about being perceived as, not good enough or wrong if they make a mistake. And I think a lot of women have felt that men are given a lot more chances there to be wrong. And if you're wrong as a man, it's never going to be you're wrong because you're a man. But sometimes I've heard that women get that. It's okay to be wrong if you're a man, woman, whatever, right? But sometimes women are just a little extra careful that they should not say something and it's going to be perceived you're not good enough in your role, and maybe that's because you're a woman. Maybe that's it. It's just about that confidence in speaking up and maybe having that confidence to being wrong.
Yeah. AK, if I can segue into the next thing we had in mind, right? When we spoke about confidence. So the way you said you had a playbook for say what worked for you, what didn't when it came to confidence, right? Was that the same for ownership? For example, we noticed when we obviously did our homework that you owned multiple projects at the very beginning of your career itself, Bliss Club, Auto Ninja, at all of these places, right? So what was like if I were to ask about your experience of owning these projects and tell us if there were some things you tell about ownership to young women, especially, right? People say just women out just out of college, starting work. What would those things be? Was there a hack playbook there as well?
There was no hack or playbook there, really. That's just something I figured out as I went. So for the confidence part of it, it was not exactly a playbook for confidence, but it was more like, do these things right and your work is going to maybe turn out right and you will build confidence as a result of that. So when it comes to ownership, I think the most important thing is to be that person who says they will do things, because especially at a startup, there'll always be a lot of things that need to be done. So initially, if you own up to it and then deliver on it, like be that person who gets things done, and then people will start giving more things to you. So it's not like I went ahead with a plan to do that or something, but I think it just kind of happened.
Yeah, I think at least I've seen that work for me also. And the idea is to just do more of that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like saying that like the biggest success hack is to make a to-do list and then do the to-do list, and that's just all life is. Just like stay at it at those things. Also, like deriving from this experience of working at startups and owning things and telling people what you're gonna do, I remember something that I read on your LinkedIn, which said, and I quote, "Convince the team at Bliss Club that I could own the website experience for a premium D2C brand." Right. My question is, how does Adivya, who has worked with, say, product and automobiles all her life, convince a Bliss Club that she could lead their D2C brand website experience?
Okay, so the first thing is just figuring out what someone would be looking for in a role like that. So let's say Bliss Club. It's a D2C website. You have some idea of the job profile and stuff. So you know that, hey, they want to know how you can drive conversions on this website. Right. And the second thing is, if you have some idea of marketing, like where do customers come from for a D2C brand, and all that, right? Like which are the right customer channels to target. So coming from like a background where I worked in B2B SaaS, and then I worked with fleet owners, it's natural that some hiring manager might think that I might not have a lot of experience in these things, right? So what I did was create a presentation saying, if I were the product manager, this is exactly what I would do. And I think that really matched with what they were expecting from a product manager. So that's what worked out there. And yeah, I think they were pretty convinced that I could do the job despite my lack of relevant experience.
Yeah, yeah. One of this presentation bit, right, reminds me of. So Anshika and I talk a lot about, both of us, I think, started working at the same place around really early, like during when I just graduated, Anshika was still in college. And one of the things we noticed and have learned over time is that there are a lot of non-technical aspects of our life that help us build an edge at work, right? Like what you said, experience and skills is on this side. Non-technical would be, for example, I could give you things from our life, right? We've noticed how much of a difference it makes if we're on a like call 2 minutes before it starts, right? Now it's a rule at C4E, for example, C4E BD also extended, is that if you're not 2 minutes early, you're late, right? We've seen that work. Need documents, context setting, doing your homework. And these are not things people teach you as a guideline. These are not things people tell you that, okay, this is a skill you build along with, I don't know, coding, right? But we think these have given us an edge at work. What do you think you have that in your life? Have you noticed some of these things that help you move forward? Making the presentation as one, instead of sending a blanket email and applying to them, you said, okay, no, I'm going to make a presentation with no strings attached, no expectations, to show them why I can understand this, right? So are there more examples from your life? Or what do you think of the ones I mentioned?
I think a lot of what you said comes down to being reliable as a person, which is very important, right? Whether it's your personal relationships or professional relationships, people need to feel that they can count on you. So a lot of what you do comes down to that. So when it comes to like taking ownership and stuff, right? One thing I try to do very consciously is like in the beginning of a professional relationship or something, try to like really understand what is expected, and then you know, keep building trust there, so that eventually like it feels like someone does not have to tell me what needs to be done, and then they kind of just trust that I'll do it, right? So what that eliminates also for me is a lot of micromanagement and following up and all that. So initially, it's always like that. You'll feel that your manager is really spending a lot of time like reviewing your work, making sure that you've done things. But if you really use that opportunity to build that trust that you are going to get this done without them asking, it just makes that professional relationship like so much easier. And you get like a little more freedom to do things your way. So I think really investing in getting people to trust that you will get things done is something that I felt works out for me.
Yeah, reaffirms a lot of what AK and I are learning right now. So I love that.
Okay, I got this. So a lot of like shop talk. I want to now segue into career breaks, which I know you have taken one and love talking about it. Tell us about your career break, what inspired it, and I know there's a lot of apprehension in the world about what career breaks are like, why you should not take one, why it's a bad taboo or blot in your resume, all of those things. What was that experience like for you, and what have you learned from on the other side?
Yeah, for me, the trigger to take a career break was like I felt my life had gone out of balance. Since 2020, I had devoted way too much of my time, my energy to work. And I think I learned a lot because of that. But at the same time, I was starting to feel really tired and burnt out. I felt like I had missed out on a lot of experiences like traveling. I felt that I was not able to focus on my fitness. So it was really about putting in a conscious effort to being a more well-rounded person. But at the same time, like you need to focus on your career as well, right? So I did make it a point that while I wanted a break, I would continue till I was convinced that, hey, I do have all the skills and experience that I need to go and convince my next employer that they should give me a job, right? So I was very clear about that. And the second reason why I was very like adamant about taking a break was that I think like for me, work and like life, right? They need to kind of feed into each other. So unless I feel fulfilled in my life, I will not be able to like bring my best self to work. So I can maybe have a job and I'll be employed, but it's not like I will be doing my best work, right? And at the same time, if I don't have a career that is fulfilling, I will not feel like completely happy about my life. So it was about trying to bring that balance back again. So I took a break, felt like I lived a little again, came back a more refreshed person. But again, like when I was taking a break, like I discussed this with a couple of managers and all over the past couple of years, actually, like, hey, I've been thinking about this. And mostly people have been a little discouraging. They're like, hey, it might look like, you know, a negative on your resume and all that. Do you want to take a risk? Like, hey, now the job market's also starting to become bad. Like, do you really want to do this right now? But yeah, I think at that point you just need a lot of clarity on why you need the break and what you hope to achieve out of this. And maybe I think over the past like 1 year, people are a lot more open to breaks right now. Like I see that change happening. A lot more people are taking breaks. A lot of senior folks are encouraging people to take breaks. And I really hope that people understand that it could be a beneficial thing.
I had a digression. You mentioned this, right? That the break was not about for you, the break, it was super important to come back from the break feeling like you are a better person, not that you move like 5 steps behind, right? So today, right now, when I think about breaks, for me, it is that, okay, the idea is not to say just party and come back feeling even more tired, right? Could it mean downtime? Could it mean, like you said, could it include experiences that help me become a better person? And better, I don't mean that I know five more skills, but I'm generally a more well-rounded person. So if what does that make sense as a break? Is there a way you should do it? I'm sure there's no right or wrong, but what was it for you? Like, how do you make sure this break helps you move forward and not takes you like 5 steps back? Uh,
Yeah, I think it involved a lot of reflection on what I had done so far in my career and life, what was working for me, what was not working for me. And I did a lot of work to get better at the things that were not working for me really well, so that I wouldn't make the same mistakes when I get back to work after my break, right? Plus a lot of thinking also about what I want for myself in the future. So it's like after college, it's like job one, then second role came, took it. Bliss Club announced what that they're hiring. I was like, took it. And then I was like, I never paused. I was just like doing things one after the other. So I also took the time to really pause and think very deeply about what I wanted to do next. Because till then everything was like, okay, opportunity came. Let's like take it right now. So it's also like slow down a little and be more conscious about what I wanted to do next.
yeah,
Okay,
that's what I was thinking.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does for sure. Definitely. Yeah.
okay, follow up. So you mentioned how you also wanted to focus on your fitness in this career break, and that would probably be my segue into also talking about you and fitness because I know it's an integral part of your life today. How did you get into fitness? Was it during this break? Was it before? Was it family, friends? What was the influence? All those things.
Uh, I started like my fitness journey to some extent in early 2017. It was like maybe half a year into moving to Bangalore, dealing with work stress, dealing with some personal problems and stuff. And then at that point, my manager was like, hey, Devi, I know you love dancing. You should go start dancing. I'm going to hold you accountable and follow up with you on this, right? So I just went and joined a Zumba class. And then I really started enjoying it. And I realized that, hey, doing some kind of movement is good to like reduce your anxiety and stress and all that. And it was like that one fun hour for me. And since dancing was like a big part of my identity also in college, like being a part of the dance team and stuff, I felt like I was becoming more like myself. So fitness happened with dancing and Zumba initially. And then that was around the time Cult was starting in Bangalore. And that started their waitlist, taking in registrations and stuff. So their branding and everything just looked really cool at that point. And I'm not a gym person. Let me make this very clear. I hate like going to a gym and working out, and I do not know how to operate even a single machine at the gym.
If you
But
had not told us this, we would never imagine, except at least because of your Twitter and the Twitter perception, for sure.
I
This is brand
cannot
new information.
like live the normal gym life, but this whole idea of group classes and stuff, that really excited me. And then I started doing it and I got hooked. And then that's when I realized that I actually enjoy lifting weights more than dancing, because two things. When you're lifting, right, I find it very meditative. Like you have to focus during that time. Like your mind cannot go anywhere if you want to move a heavy weight safely. So I think that really helped calm me down. And secondly, I think nothing has helped my confidence more than lifting, because once you see that you are becoming stronger, it just like your brain gets tricked into thinking that you're awesome anyway. So you don't have to I don't know, it just works like magic. And that really kind of seeps into the rest of my life as well. So these are the two reasons why fitness is very important to me today.
That's interesting. I also quite like how you started with, say, a Zumba class, because fitness, like the word just sounds so intense. There's gyms and there's exercise and equipment and whatnot. And as somebody on the outside, you probably like it is it's daunting. It's daunting. It's a little scary. But yeah, I like how, say, you start with some movement and then you build on to things that you find interesting, that you enjoy, all of those things. While we're there, I also want to talk about this club, which
Okay.
is also something that focuses a lot around A, movement, and B, for women.
Mm.
When we talk about companies like this club, which are talking specifically to women today as a cohort, what is it about their marketing? What is it about their essence of the product they offer, etc., that you think is something other brands could learn from?
Okay, so there are two things, right? One is simply how the product is designed. Like Bliss Club started with a pair of leggings called the Ultimate Leggings. I tried it and I accepted that it was the ultimate legging, and that really kind of, informed my decision to join the company. Plus, I also really resonated with your marketing. So, I think Bliss Club does a lot of good research on like how to build products or how to do marketing, right? So for the leggings, actually, before like designing it, Meenu went out and like mm, took body measurements of like actual Indian women. So a lot of the products you see in the market today are designed according to like women of other countries, right? They might be taller, they have different body structures. Indian women tend to be shorter, Indian women tend to be wider at the hips. So what we had initially was like a really well designed product. Uh, and plus, there was a lot of thought put into things like functionality, comfort, etc. So I think that really went into the success of it. Plus, on the marketing side, there was a lot of like art and well as science going into it. There were like people who were really good at understanding like the persona that we are building for, and not just come up with like random ideas, but really think of things that resonate with them. And then we used to like run experiments and see that, hey, what worked? Did the messaging about the pockets work? Did the messaging about body positivity work? And then kind of double down on that, right? And even for generating these ideas, it was not like a completely unstructured process. There was like a framework that we used to use. So yeah, I think it was a mix of all these things that made Bliss Club successful.
I'm thinking about this from the perspective of a Bliss Club.
Mm.
Obviously, the primary thing was to speak to these women, right? Like their business depends on it. Now, there are a lot of brands whose business probably doesn't entirely depend on talking to women in the right manner. But there is merit in doing that. So, Divya, do you have a thought on how those businesses can think about this? Like, what is the merit in understanding your customer persona, especially women, from that lens of being able to market to them better? Like, I know this is a, say, second level thought on Bliss Club, right? But do you have a thought on that? Super curious because you especially work with a brand that depended on that insight. What about brands that don't?
So I think as with building any product, right, you need to be really close to the customer. You can't be like sitting in a room and just making decisions thinking on what you believe will work based on your biases, right? You might have some ideas based on your experience and everything, but you really need to go and validate if those assumptions are true. That is very important.
Yeah.
And it also like makes sense to have a diverse team. And by that, I do not mean like just increasing the representation of women or something. There should be a balance. So there have been cases like at Bliss Club when we are having discussions and all, and someone will bring forth an idea, and then there'll be a woman in that room who just knows, hey, this does not work. Right. And then that comes from experience, right? Both your lived experience as a woman and maybe just talking to other women and stuff. So it's very important that in a room where these decisions are being made, there is a diversity of experience and opinion coming in. So there's no groupthink and there's no people like just forwarding their ideas ahead, right?
Yeah, for sure. That is helpful. AK had an idea. We could, so Divya, the idea is that this month, AK has decided to record 20 episodes, and I'm in on this with her. So with each of these people we talk to, AK, one of the questions I want to understand is, what does a woman of today want? And what I mean by woman of today is that, Divya, you're at, say, in the center of, your life and your career. You have some experience and you're in the middle and you're trying to grow. You live in an urban city. You're surrounded by, like, obviously, certain things that urban women in India have access to. So, one of the things I want to ask you is, what do you as a woman want today? And I will not give you context of whether this has to be personal or professional. Ideally, I want to know the first thing that comes to your mind. So, yeah.
I think maybe I speak for a lot of people and definitely like myself as well when I say that the woman of today needs support. So this could be from their family and their family just supporting them to go and achieve their dreams, right? I think this is something that makes me very sad that a lot of my friends might not have that support. Like I've always had the support of my family to just like go and do whatever I wanted. Like I remember like in 2016 when I said I'm going to work with this startup that's just been in existence for 1 year. Maybe it was not the most popular thing back then, right? But then my family was like, hey, we trust your judgment. If this makes you happy, like just go ahead and do it. But then I'm sure not everyone has that kind of support to maybe leave their hometowns or go and live alone or build that professional identity for themselves, right? And another thing is what I've seen work for a lot of talented women, companies have supported them. Like if you're in an interview loop or something and you understand that, hey, maybe they don't have enough support from their families. I've seen companies go out of their way to make sure that they get this person on board and then give them everything they need to move ahead in their careers, right? So I think it's, and maybe like just external mentors, everything. I think that is what people really want. Someone to say that, hey, these are the opportunities, like, can I connect you and all that. So it comes down to support, really.
Yeah. AK, you remember how I was, we often say that I'm definitely on the side of this where we should be openly be able to say that support is what we need. It is not like an individual thing, right? I remember I was talking to one of our, like friends, and she was mentioning how today what's happened to the modern woman is that she is left to raise a child alone. And what I mean by that is, imagine you live in a nuclear family, right? It is not the case that you have, say, equal shared household responsibilities. Earlier, you had, when you lived in a joint family, take the example of raising a kid. There are a lot of people as natural babysitters to take care of that kid. You're not doing anything alone. But women today in nuclear families are left alone to, say, continue doing their work, job, etc., and take care of them, like take care of the kid, right? So I think in that context, support is what I've heard of. But now that you say it, I realize how it falls. It comes down to each woman in any kind of setting. Like that's what you need. But yeah, I just remembered that example of how the modern woman of today has been just left alone. So yeah.
That reminds me, Chandni, I want to ask this to you, Divya. We often talk about how every woman, for once, should live alone in her life. That's when you understand more of yourself. You find out who you really are as a person, how you like your desk, how you like your chairs, all of those like tiny little things of life, right? You've been living alone for a while. You spent a lot of time in New York. a 2 month period actually in New York, finding out yourself, spending time with yourself, all those things. How is that for you? And what do you think on this idea, about this idea of women living alone and just finding themselves?
I think it's very empowering and like one of those things that really builds confidence simply because you're like, hey, I'm managing everything on my own. It's like one of those cases where I don't have a lot of support. So you just have that faith in yourself that no matter what happens, you just need yourself and you will be able to figure things out. Like, see, anything can happen in life, right? So just doing things on your own just builds that confidence that, hey, there is no one else I need. And no matter what happens, I can like pull myself back up and like get things done. And I think not just living alone, like living in a new city alone for a while itself, I wasn't exactly alone, but still just going out, figuring things out, like how to get from one place to another, how the public transport system works, all that, right? You just feel like, okay, cool, I can handle things. I don't need anyone's help. So that gives you a lot of self-belief.
Yeah. Awesome. That was super helpful. Anshika, did you have anything else? That was so from my
No, that was all from me. But yeah, really sweet experiences that you shared with us, Divya.
Yeah.
Love listening to your stories.
Divya, do you have anything that you want to leave us with?
Yeah.
Anything that we missed out asking, or yeah, any parting thought? To be honest.
Parting thought, I don't know. I think it's very important to not get disheartened and not to give up. Like, for me, over the past 8 years or something, there have been many times when I felt that there's no way I can do this. Maybe I should just give up. And sometimes it really helps to just talk to people you trust and people you believe in you. And also try your best to just keep your self-belief like really strong and not give up. Because while it might maybe in your first or second year feel like things are going to go nowhere, maybe by the end of 10 years you might surprise yourself with how far you've been able to come. So to never give up is maybe one thought I want to leave everyone with.
I'm glad. I think I saw your tweet from just this morning, the mindset one that we've been chit-chatting on Twitter. But yeah, I think I love that. Everybody needs that reminder once in a while. AK and I remind us, I suck at reminding myself, but I like, like I'm good at like doing this with a friend. And I think AK has been that same person for me. So I'm glad. I think the reminder comes from you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was such a fun conversation.
I will stop recording.